Okay, welcome to Adaptations and Modifications for Assessment and Instruction. Today, we're going to be talking about how we can support our students with the most complex disabilities by being a little bit creative and how we modify and adapt both the assessment and the curriculum of the Styer-Fitzgerald Program for Functional Academics. Okay, so we appreciate you being here with us today. Your presenters are me, I'm Celeste, and we love Suzanne Fitzgerald to be a part of this webinar today. We're really excited about presenting some more webinars in the next couple of months, inviting special guests, different teachers, different users in the program, talking about different subjects. So stay tuned to the newsletter that you guys are all a part of now, and hopefully will receive in your email boxes in the next few days, talking about the things that we have coming up. I'd like to introduce Suzanne Fitzgerald. She is the co-author of Functional Academics, the Styer-Fitzgerald. She's the Fitzgerald of Styer-Fitzgerald Program for Functional Academics, and she's been working with students with disabilities for more than 27 years and was a classroom teacher for 10. Her passion place is working with kiddos with very significant and complex disabilities. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Suzanne?
Well, you did such a great job introducing me, so thank you. I'm very excited to be here. As Celeste mentioned, I love talking about getting creative and modifying the program to reach all students, particularly students that have more complex and unique needs. So this is a topic that I was excited to be a part of. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, and this is a topic this is probably the topic that you and I could probably go on for hours, right? As we learned prior. I've also worked with kids with disabilities for more than 25 years, and being creative and how we reach students was one of my favorite parts. So we've both kind of collaborated on how we're going to do this today. So we just want to let you know that we are going to be looking at how we do adaptations and modifications for both the assessment component of the program and the curriculum. Remember that the assessment program is just the piece we use to know to learn about what we know, what do we know the student knows, right? How do we know what the student knows? The assessment piece. And I'm sure many of you have thought about that and continue to think about that. And it's a continual part of our job is what is inside that beautiful body, right? What does our student know? So the assessment is a great place, a great starting point. The student assessment is what do we know? What do we know of the student? What do we know? What does the student know? And the portfolio is what do we know about that student, right? So today we're just going to talk about when we're doing some assessments, how we can modify for those assessments to make sure we're really trying to learn what the student is capable of doing to then be able to create and run and implement a real comprehensive curriculum for them throughout the year. So we're going to talk about the accommodations in both of these areas today, okay? So when we look at implementation of the Functional Academics program, for any of you that have been on training with us before, we start with assessment, right? Assessing each one of the students. We go through portfolio, we set up program data books, we link that assessment to the curriculum. Then we do so much of the robust work in teaching the curriculum lessons and collecting that ongoing progress data, which then helps guide us into creating those IEP goals or updating reports or making new IEP goals. We can even adapt and modify in ways that we organize our classroom. So these are a few points that we're going to discuss today for ways that we can adapt the program to our students. Okay. Just a quick reminder, these are the content areas for elementary: functional reading, color, shapes, location, technology, writing, time telling, calendar, money, math, community-based training, and independent skills. Some of you may be looking at these content areas and thinking, I can only think of a couple that my students would be able to do. Yeah, go ahead and mute yourselves, guys. Thanks. Thank you. Let's see. I could mute them. There we go. And I know it's often easy to look at these and think, not sure my student can do all of these, but I guarantee you with some accommodations and modifications, many of our students can attempt or participate in most of these content areas. For secondary, again, we have functional reading, then we have technology, time telling, writing. Now, how do we manage time? Money, math, budgeting, and banking. Now, what do we do with the fact that we know money? What do we do with it? How do we budget for it? Community-based training. How do we take these skills into the community? How do we prepare for vocational placements and independent skills? So all of these areas will be used for the assessment and the curriculum and can all be modified in some way or form. Okay. Here is just some real quick general suggestions for adaptations and modifications. Then Suzanne and I are going to jump into pulling out a few content areas in both the assessment and curriculum to talk about how we would specifically modify for those specific content areas. So a couple of the general suggestions are enlarging materials, right? Like all of you have access to the teaching materials kits, which comes with an awesome foundation for materials. But some of our students just need larger pieces, right? Or using contrasting colors for students with visual impairments, similar to the picture that you see in the background of this slide with the yellow color and the black letter. Changing the position of materials so that students can touch or gaze at the answers. So students who have a hard time looking down at a desk, right, may need something with an upright position to be able to see the materials that they're working on. Many students use eye gaze and their position accordingly, so they may not have physical mobility, but they can use their eyes to make decisions. So we want to make sure we honor that as well. Sometimes just the ability to minimize distractors. So instead of having multiple options on the table for students to select, you may just have two. Other tactics like reducing work periods, shorter work sessions throughout the day can be a helpful modification. You've got some great materials from your kits, but we always encourage you to also use materials from your classroom that you may already have access to, right, to be able to bring it into the program. And then Suzanne, you can add to all of this when I'm done here, but we really highly encourage you to collaborate and individualize these goals with your IEP team and other professionals district-wide. Sometimes just ourselves, it's hard to figure out a solution, but oftentimes if we work collaboratively, we can think of somebody else often thinks of something that we never thought of, right? For how to adapt. Did you want to add to that, Suzanne?
I think the biggest thing that I want to add is just making sure that everybody knows we're trying to really emphasize and make sure that everybody knows and accesses functionalacademics.net, and all of the materials that we have posted in there are intended to be modified, changed, and created in an easy, user-friendly way. So if you haven't explored there and don't know already, we have formatted all of our flashcards as labels, which is the easiest way to create flashcards. So we tell you where to get them cheap and what size to get. And then you can go into the template and change it up. So you can change that background color, enlarge the letters. If you happen to find that it's in a format that you're not able to work with, just reach out to us and we'll send it to you in a different format to make it really easy for you. So make sure you explore there. And as Celeste mentioned, always make sure you're tapping into your other related service providers and your team and other people who can help you really identify how best to modify for these students. Particularly if you have kids with vision impairments, make sure that you are able to access and speak with a teacher of the visually impaired. You can learn a lot of stuff about how kids might be able to see better that we as teachers are not trained and wouldn't know instinctively because it's very specific to the individual child. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to jump into a couple of content areas here. We look at the assessment, right? Remember that assessment is just how do we try and know what the student knows? How are we trying to extract information, what they know? Functional reading, we're going to touch on functional reading, colors, and writing, just as a couple of examples of adapting assessment. Some of the ways that we can adapt the functional reading assessment, the original assessment is to look at all of the sheets of words and use the viewfinder to go down the list, right, and read the words that are going off the list. Some of our students might have a very difficult time doing that. So I've seen teachers do a lot of different creative things with presenting sight words and assessments. Sometimes they're writing it on iPads or tablets, incorporating into their augmentative communication devices. One of my biggest and easiest recommendation is grab those flashcards that Suzanne's talking about from the teaching materials kit, or the ones that you have with labels on them that are a little bit bigger than a list, and use those for testing in the assessment, either one by one or in a field of 3 or 4 for students who are nonverbal. Using wipe-off boards with a variety of color markers is always really fun, just like quick wipe-off board and writing a few words, and then the students get to erase them as they write them. We're just trying to see what they know, right? Changing positioning of the screen or the cards to meet the eye gaze. So instead of expecting the student to look down on the table, can you hold them up? Can you put them on a felt board? Can you put them on we're going to talk about a few of these things as we move forward, but PVC pipe screen, frame, can you put them on a yardstick? How can you move the physical position of the materials so that the students can access them in an easy way? And hey, let's use PEC symbols or pictures paired with words. It's a way that we can adapt that sight word. Can they recognize the word paired with the picture? And again, it's just a test to see where they place. Then we'll decide how we're going to instruct as we move forward, right? Things with colors could be as easy as tons of objects. All of you guys in your classroom have colored blocks, markers, crayons, different things that you can identify for labeling or sorting. Some of the things I used to do with my early learners who have a harder time sitting at a desk still would be like throwing colored balls into baskets, right? Just sorting and organizing just to see if they can visually differentiate, right? what's going on there. Touch screens are really fun too. There's a lot of programs that do color ID. So these are just a few different examples. Writing, we want to see if our students can, if they do have that ability to hold a pen or pencil, great, get a little creative. Sometimes using those touch screens, even with your fingers, like how many of us have signed recently an Adobe document or something with just a mouse or a finger, using those styluses on tablets and iPads, or typing on, computer augmentative communication devices. What we're looking for here is kind of just what is their expressive output like, okay? I'll have you do the next one, Suzanne, which is location concepts, money map, and time telling. You just want to talk about a couple of adaptations we've identified here for those three areas. Go for it.
Sure. And just so that everybody, those of you who are secondary teachers, the on functionalacademics.net, we do have pictures paired with all of the sight words, if that would be helpful for your students. So just so you know, and we also have, because the pictures that come with elementary are black and white in the functional reading section, we also have some color images that are on functionalacademics.net as well. As far as location concepts go, the assessment is actually set up pretty well for not just you looking at the pictures, because if the pictures can be very difficult for kids to understand location concepts based off of a picture. So there is actually part of the assessment that is, using actual objects. And so that's a good one to play around with. Again, we're assessing, so we're trying to find out what they know. We can get creative with what we teach when we talk about the curriculum. Money math, I would, starts with matching money. You could use like actual bills if the money on the model is too close together. Obviously getting calculators that are larger or modified in certain ways is a good way to incorporate that. And then as far as time telling goes, using bigger clocks, if visually the ones that are provided in the program are too small, and looking at using some clocks online. Again, there's some digital if kids respond well to a tablet or a computer screen, and that's an option as well.
Okay. Awesome. Again, feel free if anyone has any questions as we go along to put them in the chat. I don't have all of the picture windows down, like I don't have all of your guys's video, photos in the screen here. So I may not see if you raise your hand. So if you do have a question, just feel free to put it into the chat.
And really quickly, before we move on, I think it's important to keep in mind that this is an assessment. You're gathering information, and with our kids with more complex disabilities, this would be a really good opportunity to videotape and look for perhaps some subtle communication or things that might be happening that we miss oftentimes in the busy day-to-day. Really take notes about if you're noticing that kids are leaning toward a response or reaching or looking. if it's outside of just the regular prompt of show me, point to, touch, make those notes, because that's going to be really helpful information when it comes down to programming and looking at where do you want to go and what do we want to focus our energy on. Clearly, we all have students who maybe don't have a functional form of communication. That's going to be our number one priority. And we have some suggestions for how to incorporate that into the program. But you still want to go through this exercise of trying to see some of that, gather some of that information, make some notes about what might be good accommodations and helpful to know when you get into programming.
Okay, awesome. Here's just a few pictures that we were talking about. So this one to the left here, where you see the sight words on a yardstick, is a great a great example of raising the visual field. Here you have some of those pictures paired with words on an electronic device. Here's a large clock. You can see the positioning here for that student has definitely been modified for that student to be able to reach and signal what they're working on. This is an example of an interactive digital clock, which could be kind of fun as well. And here's a couple of pictures of using objects, using objects for color matching, color sorting, one-to-one object correspondence. Okay, as we talk about modifying curriculum, this is where the fun stuff happens, right? Again, we're going to talk about functional reading for how we then instruct, right? And as Suzanne was talking about, functional reading goes hand in hand with functional communication, right? What our students are able to communicate based on what they can receptively and expressively identify. So using some of those words aligned with the communication methods. So if your student has an alternative communication device or apps that they use to communicate, can you program those sight words into the from the program into that communication device for them to use expressively, working collaboratively with SLP? Can we add, can we combine those words with pictures and then eventually fade? Use some of those sight words in daily schedules, or use the e-readers provide a real nice auditory feedback. Some of our students need that dual sensory input when programming. And I know you had more to talk about here, Suzanne, on functional reading curriculum.
Yeah, I think this is a great place to start for those students that maybe don't have a functional form of communication. I think that, establishing as a team, what are you going to work on? Or perhaps there is a device or picture symbols that your student is using, but maybe they don't use it reliably, or they need some practice with that. Setting up the program to where you start with matching. So having like the communication symbols, whatever they're using, and if it is on a device, you can use the device, but sometimes we need to take a step back and actually teach those students what those symbols are before they can isolate and find it on a device where there's a whole bunch on there. So printing out some of those symbols, and even starting with 2 or 3 symbols presented to the student, holding up one and saying, this is a clock, show me clock, and having them point to the same symbol on their, in front of them. And if they can do that, being like, yes, that's a clock. And then I would take it a step further when you're establishing this, because so often we teach kids these words and we expect them to understand what that means based off of this picture that can be sometimes very abstract. So actually then having them match it to the actual item or the activity, if it's an activity that they're identifying, that's another step to really help with that association. And if you need to, in the very beginning, you point to the clock, say, this is the clock, this is a clock, show me clock, and then point to the clock for them. This is clock, so that they understand that you're wanting them to match. Take data on the sight word data sheet, use that same format. If they can match it or touch it after you do, circle it if it's correct, mark a line if it's incorrect. Once they get it correct with you helping them point or look or whatever it might be, then take a step back and have them match without you giving the extra prompt. And then go from there. And by taking data, you're going to know once they understand what that word is, can identify it on their own, and when they're ready for more. The other thing that I would really encourage you to think about incorporating into a program like that is identifying body parts. so that kids can learn how to, identify if, especially kids who are in wheelchairs all day. It's so important that they're able to tell us when something hurts, if they need to be repositioned. And we oftentimes forget to teach that. But think about quality of life and how important that would be and how awesome it would be for them to be able to learn how to identify what's bothering them and where to go from there. So again, you can use a lot of the data system that's incorporated into the program. Same with when your paraeducators learn how to take data, they can be taking data on it, so you can be watching and seeing when they're ready for more. It's just a good way to kind of start with the program.
Yeah, such good things to talk about with functional reading. When we look at money math, both for elementary and secondary, the program itself includes a lot of really great tools, like the visual price cards that are included in there, which means there's actually a card with the price. So if you're asking the student to give you $3, you can actually show them the price that you're asking for to give that visual cue. You can add pictures of the shopping items that you're looking for. You can do dollar bills and matching, really look at those vertical visual fields. Adding braille or tactile representations can be a really cool feature as well. Again, focusing on the function of that skill, right? Function rather than the skill itself. So what are they going to use the money math for, right? What is that going to be useful for them in the future? So understanding the concept of buying something, right? Getting something and receiving something tangible. So different ways that you can accommodate that. I also like to do verbal prompts, like counting out loud. Sometimes our students just need that extra verbal support when they're first starting, right? Give me $5 or count me $10, counting with them, 1, 2, 3, right? Giving them that auditory feedback. Many of our students really like that auditory feedback at first, and then we can fade as we go along. So anything else you wanted to add from money math?
I think just, again, the importance of looking at, and always keeping in mind that when you have kids who are always gonna have somebody else with them, even if that's the case, like they're never going to go grocery shopping by themselves, they need somebody else there, just always looking for ways that they can be involved in the process in one way or another. And, whether it's handing the money to the cashier or picking between wheat bread or rye bread or whatever it might be, just making sure that you're looking at how do we incorporate these skills and the function that's going to really benefit them most when they leave the school system.
Awesome. For writing, again, going back to how we actually program for writing, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with technology nowadays with touch screens and iPads and styluses and things like that. We continue to look at fine motor adaptations for those students who do have an okay grasp, because there's not always going to be technology available, right? So the students that do have an ability to grab fine motor, can they write, can they sign a signature? Can they do anything close to being a signature? As far as doing personal information, writing phone numbers, addresses, things like that, I would definitely look at, can that be something that we incorporate into a voice output system if writing is not a possibility, right? Because what is the function of writing? The function of writing is to be able to give students an expressive outlet, right? So what is your name? What is your address? What is your phone number? Can you write down a few things for me? Can you do a shopping list for me? Can you write your to-do list for the day, right? Organizing yourself, kind of thinking of why do students need to write nowadays? And then how can we adapt and modify for them in the event that a student can't maybe decode all the words or letters or all of that. So can they use these technology pieces as adaptations for them? Okay. So there we go. Let's look at, does anybody have any questions around functional reading, money math or writing? It could be specific to any students that you have in your program or any programs that you're already running. Anyone have any questions or comments? No? Okay.
I do have a question.
Hi, Kevin. Sure.
Oh, thank you. I was wondering, because one thing I was working on recently, like I have a student who's working on dollar bills, like purchasing, things like that. And something that's come up with our school was teaching them to use cards. debit cards, things like that, because yeah, in some cases, some students would end up with debit cards through their bank.
Mhm.
So I was wondering, like, and that's kind of how I work, like, because I'll take the students out to community, we'll purchase things at the store, but we don't normally use bills because I don't carry the bills on me, of course, but like we'll still use a card. I was wondering how to, like, is there a way to kind of like work the dollar bill part of it into using cards? I was trying to figure out how to do that before. So
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Suzanne comment, but I have a comment that I've been, like a little story that I've been telling as I've been training the last year is often dollar bills, like if you were to do a program where a student were to count out the dollar bills and then use a card to pay for something, right? Like if you could do like a match or a program where they pair up a price, because the thing about dollar bills is it gives students a tangible way to see how much something costs. When you swipe a card, there's no real, it's still abstract, right? It's only the action of swiping the card, but there's no real concept of how much money was there to start with. How much did I just spend? How much is left? Right? Where when you have like 10 $1 bills in your hand, for example, and you count out 5, you can mathematically see that you had 10, you spent 5, and now you have 5 left. So I've been suggesting to teachers to kind of do programs that pair those two together, right? Like the physical and the card. And I just talk about my son, he was like in kindergarten last year, but we had this whole situation because he earned $20 from me, but I didn't give him tangibly $20, right? We went to the store and he picked out his Pokemon thing and I was like, I'll use my debit card. Your $20 are here in my card and I'll pay for it, right? And so we did, and he was happy and went home. Well, that night he had this full tantrum and meltdown because I didn't give him his $20. I said, yeah, I did, baby. I paid with my card. Remember, I paid with the card. No, you didn't give me, that's your money. That's your card. You didn't give me my $20. And it was like a big deal. I had to go back to the ATM, take out the $20, give him the $20, and like have him pay me back those $20 for him to get the connection between the tangible money and some digital abstract concept. So I think there's a great way for you to program in both, right? Maybe you have programs in your classroom where you're practicing the dollar bill counting and then pairing it with how much is on this card, kind of that functional math piece. And then when you go to the store, make sure they understand how much balance is on the card, how much things are worth, and then how much is left. Does that make sense?
yeah, I appreciate that, because I'm big on both sides of it, like being able to understand using a card, and then because I'm big on cash myself, like I like using that. So I appreciate your input on that.
Absolutely. Do you want to add anything, Suzanne?
I was just going to say, I think it also, again, is another area that depends on the student and what they, what they are able to comprehend and learn. And just, again, looking ahead to the greatest level of independence, even if they're going to be dependent. So I think, like Celeste said, the cards are great because you have kids who, I had a student who learned, she was completely blind and she learned sight words by Braille. And she was able to identify like some of her favorite items. Her mom had the Braille sight words in the cabinet, like for her favorite snacks. And she was able to, she had tangible bills on the back of the card. So she was able to create her own shopping list by going through her cards, finding the items she wanted to buy at the store, matching the bills on the back, so that then when she went to the store, I mean, she's totally blind, so she had to have her mom or somebody help her actually find the items, but she had her own basket. Even if mom was doing other shopping, it was separate. So my student was doing her own thing. She would get her items, go up to the counter, put them on the counter, hand the money. It was it's a perfect thing for her because she needed that. She's so proud of being able to go shopping on her own. I have another student who we worked on money skills for a very long time, and we didn't really make progress. And his mom and I had to sit down and go, okay, what is the purpose? Where are we going with this? And what that student loved was going up to the counter and just handing money over to the cashier, just being the one to pay. And that could totally be a card. Like his mom would give her debit card or credit card. He would hand it to the cashier, and that was awesome for him. He was still part of the process. So looking at kids with more severe disabilities, I would definitely look at what is the outcome going to be, what's going to be best for their self-efficacy, their quality of life. And then on the flip side, if you have kids with higher money skills, absolutely teaching them how to use a card. And a great way to get started is the prepaid shopping cards. They're safer, easier to monitor, and there are those lessons in money math for that part. So that's a good kind of stepping stone in between the two. So yeah.
All right, thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you guys very much.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad we had a little bit of time to dig into that. Okay, so we're just there's a couple more here. Let's see, time management. Again, like somebody just commented about analog clocks versus digital. It's really similar, right? That analog clock is ability to actually see time moving, where digital is just one time and space, right? So if you're able to add analog clock figures to daily schedules and time management program, it can be really helpful in helping students understand the meaning of that clock, not just the ability to read it, but what time does it actually mean? Using touchscreens to create daily schedules. We talk a lot about how to accommodate and adapt different daily schedules. I have a lot of teachers say to me, the students know their schedules, they don't need their own schedules. But when you leave school and you don't have a real predictable schedule, being able to manage your time and understand what's going to happen during the day is really important, right, for all of us. So using daily schedules with your students. Sometimes we need to use objects on daily schedules or things that have tactile input. Some of our students that are early learners who may not have the concept of photo and pictures yet may need a visual sequence of objects to understand what's coming next. Using visual timers and physical objects on shelves can all be ways that you can adapt time management. Pre-vocational, like what Suzanne was just talking about, which was so amazing, was, can you have students participate in any part of the vocation, right? So a vocational doesn't mean necessarily, the student is going to be able to work independently in the community or not, right? Is the student going to be employable or not? Can we start by creating jobs within the classroom and the school environment? Can we break those jobs down into smaller skills and really small components of things they can do? Is it just swiping the card? Maybe that's okay, creating multiple opportunities for participation, changing physical location, physical position. We'll show you some pictures in a minute. And tell us about, Suzanne, tell us a little bit about one of your students who did the coffee ordering job. This is in regards to an adaptation for a job, right?
Well, and I'm a big fan of customized employment, really looking at the individual student and what did they enjoy. We sometimes get stuck thinking that kids have to fit into kind of the stereotypical jobs that people with disabilities get plugged into, but not everybody wants to do those things. And we all get to choose our career path, and for the most part. And so why shouldn't our students? And so really looking at their strengths, what they like, how can you customize a job that works around those things so that it's really individualized for the student. And I don't know if you guys have been in my trainings, you've heard Miranda's story, and we had her coffee routine and, set it up to where it was something that she was in charge of, she could participate in. And really where it all begins, I wish I had time to go into the whole story, but we don't have time. So I do want to emphasize that if you have kids with more severe complex needs, starting with, like we talked about, the communication is key, really building on how do we incorporate more opportunities for communication, remembering to start with things that the student enjoys, not just needs and, I need to go to the bathroom, I want water, that kind of thing. Really looking at how are you going to engage them and make them want to communicate with you. I also want to emphasize that where we started with Miranda, and we never could have built a program around her if we didn't get her to come out of her shell, if you will. So often our kids with more significant disabilities end up becoming passive. They have worked their whole lives trying to communicate with other people, but because their communication is so unique, it gets overlooked or ignored, not intentionally, of course, but they've tried and tried and tried, and nobody understands what they're trying to say. So they just kind of give up. So oftentimes kids just kind of, why bother? So we need to get them to want to communicate, to show us what they like, what they don't like, really to engage. So building in choices is huge. So the other program, if you start with 2 programs with these students, it would be functional reading based on communication and picture identification. Picture identification is set up for kids to be able to learn how to identify people. And it can be pictures, or it can be tactile symbols, identifiers, that kind of thing. But getting them to learn how to associate a picture with someone is a great way to incorporate choices and power of control. So, and again, another thing that is important to remember is that our kids are done 2 and 4 so much that any opportunity that they have to participate or make a choice or be empowered is huge. So having them learn how to identify who they want to sit next to at lunch, who they want to push them out to the bus after school. Anytime you have an opportunity, I use the example in our last session, and I know this is silly, but I literally did this with my students. I would, sit down to take data, and I'd hold up a pen and a pencil, and I would say, should I take data with a pen today or a pencil? Have them point to one, and I'd say, great choice. That's exactly what I was thinking. And just gives them an opportunity. Well, kids start to learn, oh, they are listening to me, and oh, I do have something to offer. So they start to really put themselves out there. When you gather that information and really get a clear picture of what these kids can do, what they enjoy, and when they start building on that communication, you can look ahead to what kind of jobs are out there? What can I create to help them, transfer from school into employment where they're engaged socially and they're a part of a community, and, they're out and doing things and not just isolated at home, so that's what I would really encourage you to kind of focus energy on when you're able to.
Absolutely. So we're going to share a couple of pictures here from the Prevoke and so functional readings. You can see a student here that has a PowerPoint of sight words, and he goes through and reads them, right? How do we use screens instead of cards? You can see the dollar bills attached to the yardstick here with the price card and the picture, all these different visual adaptations and spatial and positional adaptations. This PVC holder, was there anything in that, Suzanne, or is it just open?
No, it's open because you want to be able to look straight through it and really see where eyes are moving.
Okay, I didn't know if there was a screen that I just couldn't see in there, or if that was open. Okay, cool. So this is like working on eye gaze then?
Yep. So he would pick that's picture ID. So you can see there's a picture of a student up there. The other one, there's only one student right now, but there's usually more than one.
Mm-hmm.
And he would look to the student that he would want to go and greet or visit.
Awesome.
And that's how the lesson was actually signed up. So he would spend time picking up here, going and visiting with them. We usually had something set up that they enjoy. I had a student who loved to play catch. Mm-hmm. And so kids would all have a beanbag at their desk. And so he would pick somebody he'd want to go greet. He'd go over to him. He'd have to find him himself. And then as soon as he found the person, they would play catch for a minute so they could engage together, and it was fun. And then he'd go and find somebody else. Cool. I had another student who we used flowers that she would go and deliver to people when she would greet them. And their reaction was always like, oh, thank you so much. And, they were excited. So she loved that, being engaged with them. So just having some way that they can kind of interact and be rewarded for finding that person. So it's not just like, oh yeah, okay, there's Dustin. Great. Now let's move on to somebody else. It's like, no, They got to have that time together.
Yeah, really the application. I love this picture down here. This is an object. It's an object schedule, but you called it something else.
The calendar boxes, they're also known as. So this is for students who are not able to, maybe aren't able to see picture symbols, even a tactile, like you can see on the other picture where it says January, those are tactile symbols. Mm-hmm. And this student, it was completely blind. And so she was really able to established between different textures really well. So we could use like partial tactile symbols for her to be able to identify what that word is or what that means. Whereas this other student needed the full object. So that's where we started. This was his schedule. So he would go through and grab the object. And again, we associate it with what we were doing, but it gave him a way of understanding what's going to happen throughout his day, how much time is left. When we remove you can see the black part up. When he finishes something, that black part would go down so he can see how many or feel how many are closed versus how many are open. So he knows what's left throughout the day.
Very cool. Very cool. So these are all different ways that time management and student schedules can be accommodated and modified. Okay. There's some great pictures here as well. This is Suzanne's student in the middle with her coffee orders, because her job was to take coffee orders from school staff, go to Starbucks, put in the order and bring back the coffee orders and deliver them to staff around the school. We have a young man here baking cookies. I love just seeing him in a stander, just changing students' position and visual fields to be able to see different parts of their environment is so important as well. You have another young man here that's doing some filing, the vocational tasks. These are some of my students. Go ahead.
He's actually working at my office. So I have,
yeah, I didn't know that. Like,
I have 3 former students who work for me, and he's stacking boxes. He also absolutely loves using our cardboard shredder. So he gets excited to send and again, he needs assistance, but he loves being able to be the one to feed it through and catch it. Awesome. And so, yeah, that's what he's doing there.
Yeah. These are some students that I had several years ago. We had a big garden project for them, and that was an amazing project for them because they were able to, everybody had a role, everybody had a way that they could participate in the best way possible. Some of the students were really good at watering the plants, others were good at sorting the herbs. We actually had an open house on Fridays where families and community members would come to the school and purchase products. So some students were able to do bits and pieces of the money math. And even just greeting, right? Being able to be recognized and greeted and, present was really important for them. Some of the students made it into the local markets, like a farmer's market, to sell their products. So lots of different ways and places for our students to be involved in the community. Okay. So did you want to quickly touch on IEP goals? We have about 12 minutes left.
This is just an example of a goal, like a site work goal from the IEP goal banks, and how you might modify it for the example that we talked about, using communication words instead of the site words that are in the program, that kind of thing. So it just breaks it down to kind of show you some ways that you can modify.
Okay, we do want to let you know when you guys get the copy of the slide deck, there are links in each one of the comments, and we do have an IEP goal bank that is linked into the comments of this slide. So make sure to check that out. Okay. And we do have an incredible resource that Suzanne has been working on for quite a while now called Beyond Expectations. And we just want to make sure you guys have access to the beginning of this as well. This is on functionalacademics.net. Do you want to add something to that?
Just that there's interviews and inventories that are specifically designed for kids with more severe disabilities. So that's a great place to start. And you can replace your Styer-Fitzgerald ones with these if you want to, for gathering information. These are it's just like some resources in here. There's also some awesome modules called Open Hands, Open Access modules that are geared for kids with severe disabilities. They're actually designed for paraeducators, but teachers have loved taking them. They're awesome. So there's links in here that will link you to that information so you can see what they have to offer, and just lots of resources, lots of links and stuff. So make sure you check it out and explore this area.
Excellent. So as you can see here in the comment section of these slides, you'll find here the websites that we're talking about that we're referring to. Okay. So before we enter into questions, I just want to make sure that, let's see, where's my thing? I'm going to put my email in the chat if anyone has any questions and wants to reach out. And then also, I'm going to be sending you guys a follow-up email with the slide deck and the recording of this video, of this webinar. If you don't see it in about an hour, save my email address and search your spam folder or search your email inbox. For some reason, you know how Google likes to catch things that have links into spam, especially if it's a first time email from somebody. So definitely look in your spam folder if you don't see anything from me. Okay,
And
we
not
want you
only if
guys.
it's the first time, it sometimes just randomly will go into spam. It's very frustrating.
I feel like it's anytime there's a link involved, it goes straight to spam. Okay, so questions and discussion. Are there any specific questions on how to adapt the programs you guys are currently running? Are there any adaptations or modifications that you've created that you'd like to share with us? You can talk to us about specific students. You can ask us any questions about specific programs, but we're definitely going to give you guys a few minutes to discuss. So anyone want to ask anything?
Feel free to just unmute your microphone and that's probably the easiest way. Or you can type in the chat box if you prefer, but jump in.
Hey, Jennifer Pinkowski from Renton School District here. Hi, Suzanne. So I have a student who's currently working on so I'm at middle school, so I'm using the secondary program. He's working on the first sight word list, and he doesn't currently have a timekeeping goal on his IEP, but lately he's been really perseverating on questions about stores that he likes to go to with his family and he Lowe's is open, Target is open, Nordstrom is open, and he's just asking me these questions literally over and over and over again. These are just really swirling in his head. So I had an idea today, literally just today, about making just like in a Google Doc, put in a table and put the logo of the store and put the time that the store opens and the time that the store closes, because those are open and close. Those are on the list, and teach him to reference it. I don't know, answer it for yourself. Is Lowe's open? Is Lowe's closed? And then link, and then even just start with time telling skills. And I emailed his mom and she said he used to know how to tell time on both digital and analog, but he's lost the skill because of course nobody's practicing it with him. So I feel like that's a good like little net of skills to kind of work on as a package. And honestly, I'm wondering anything else you would wrap into that.
Does he get to go to these stores regularly? Like, is he obsessing about when he gets to go back? Do they go like every on the weekend?
What does he like to do at Lowe's? And his mom said nothing. He likes to walk around and look at the lights and count them and tell when there's a light bulb that's burned out. And I'm like, these are job skills. I was so excited. So nothing. Yes, this the family gets out and about, and yes, I think he gets to go to these places fairly frequently.
Okay, so what I would think about doing is, you said he was able to tell time, so
Yes.
you may not have to do what. So Celeste, can you go back a few slides to where?
I think you're going to need a refresher on that skill at least.
Okay, so right here, stop here. Oh, back to the picture. There you go. So the color calendar that you see down in the bottom.
Yes.
This was actually created. It's a modification of the original one that we created for another student who obsessed about going swimming and going on our outings. Like, she loved going on the community outings, loved going swimming.
Okay.
This is a student who has more severe disabilities, so she didn't really have a concept of time, wasn't really able to tell time. It didn't really mean anything to her. So we came up with a system, and you all know, if you know me, you know I'm not a fan of teaching secondary kids to match colors unless there's a function or a purpose. What we did is these days here are color coded, because the student that we were trying to teach, like I help her identify when she gets to go swimming and when she gets to go on her outing, it was dependent on like we could match the color. So she had a basket with flower bouquet in it of the color of the day. So she would come in the morning. On Monday, she would grab the red flowers. We'd do this together, put it in the bouquet so that she could see the red flowers. And we could say, today is red day, Monday. Here's the red flowers. You get to go swimming on Thursday, white day. you know, you've got 1, 2, 3 days left or whatever.
Sure.
Her calendar actually was of a month. So she was able to actually see a whole month at one time, but every Monday is always red. Tuesday is always yellow. Her mom had the same setup at home. So she was getting that reinforcement both places, was really able to start associating those colors. We also incorporated the flowers into picture ID. So she was able to hand the flowers out and go and like, or they were handed out. She would go and collect them and put them in her little bin. We've done it with a basketball hoop that had the color bean bags for another student. So he would throw the color of the day in there, could match it to know when he's going to mom's house or dad's house.
Sure.
Anyway, with this student here, the calendar that you're seeing, this is her knowing who she's going home with throughout the day. So because her parents are divorced and she has a care provider, so she liked to know who she was going home with. Anyway, sorry, back to your student.
No, that's okay. That's all really good.
Well, and if you had a calendar, and he could probably handle a month at a time, and if you could talk to mom and say, hey, can we come up with, you know, are there a couple of days that you could commit to going to Target, Lowe's, whatever it might be, so that you can have him go up and look at the calendar, and when he starts to obsess about it. I had to do this a lot in the beginning with the student who was obsessing about swimming. She would sign, you know, she has a modified sign, and we'd say, oh, nope, not today. Let's go look. And we'd go up and we'd say, how many days? And she would put her hand on ours and we'd count. Well, pretty soon when we'd go up to the calendar, she would point right to when she gets to go swimming and would nod like, okay, I get it. So she would only, and then she went from checking it literally probably like 100 times a day down to eating it like once or twice a day, just to kind of reassure herself that, and then the obsessing went away. So that might be a way to kind of help him with time management, you know, and also his anxiety and wanting to obsess on, you know, when does he get to go?
Yeah, I actually really like that, okay, it's open, but I'm not going now. I get to go Saturday. Yeah.
Right. Yes. And I can show you, like I could send a picture or post a picture of the month calendar if you want to see what that looks like. And I think I have like some pictures of the actual like association with it. We got flowers like at the Dollar Tree. You wouldn't want to use flowers probably for him, but whatever he likes. And
I don't think that it would be, I think that I don't think that going that far is necessary for him, but yeah, I like this.
Or just having like Monday, you know, just the word Monday posted below, and then Velcro it off and do Tuesday. So he's actually like seeing the day, you know, is if it, you know, but yeah.
Good visual. I like that.
One thing I wanted to throw in there too is with the sight words. If there's any of the sight words that you can come up with that align with those stores, like words that they would find in those stores, to make the words that you're working on with him more functional, right?
Enter, exit, all of that.
Yeah, I even say go take the next time you go to Target, go on a sight word hunt and write down all the words you see.
Yes.
And then make them functional, right?
Yeah, that would be we go on sight word hunts at school all the time, but that would be a great one for them to do just while they're out shopping.
Yep.
Sure.
Cool. Thank you so much, Don. Anyone else have any questions or comments or things that they'd like to talk about? We only have a couple of minutes left.
I know I took up all the time. Sorry.
That's okay. Everyone learns from everybody, right? So if anyone else would like to share, please go ahead.
I'm also happy to stay on for a couple minutes if anybody has anything.
Okay, so we're gonna, we'll stay on for a couple of minutes, and thank you so much for sharing your situation with us, your case with us. Thank you so much for being here, and we will send you a recording of this video once we're done.
And the slide deck.
And the slide deck.